Welcome to the FormFast User Group webinar. My name is Philip Blanks, and I will be your host today. First, to thank you all for joining us this morning. As busy, we have designed these brief monthly user group webinars to give our users some valuable information on our products and solutions. So I'm going to go over how to build a workflow, and today's presenter is our Director of Product Management, Sean Curtis. But before we started, there are just a few things to go over. Now, your thoughts and questions during the session, so please at any time in the chat panel or in the Q&A section on your right hand of your screen, and all questions will be answered. Secondly, the audio for this webinar will broadcast through your computer speakers. If you experience any difficulty with your audio, please send me a message and I'll approve you to join the teleconference. Once you're connected to the teleconference, make sure that your computer speakers are then muted. At the end of the webinar, you're going to be directed to a page that's going to allow you to register for all the upcoming webinars, as well as request a demo or additional information on our solutions. So now, and introduce Sean to begin his presentation on how to build a workflow in FastFlow. Here we go.
I'm going to go over here and share my desktop to get to my slides. So today we're going to be talking about how we build the workflows in FastFlow. Not actually, but I have one slide on just best practices of what to do ahead of time. So preparing to build your workflows. So FastFlow is going to give you the opportunity to kind of build applications, really. If you want a big picture, it's a form around it. It's an application. So you're collecting data, automating processes, you're in collaboration, those types of things. So it really handled as a project. So handle it like a project by getting a business sponsor involved, and that really helps to make sure that it's adopted by your end users. So get your business sponsor involved, and then work with everyone who's involved in the process. Start with the current process, what you're currently doing, even if it's something that's focused around the use of a form, but maybe there's a process that's just out there and it's not really well controlled. If you get out, start thinking about how you might collect data and how you might move through the process, in a workflow. Process on paper, figure it out there, talk to everybody involved, and if you've seen past webinars on our processes and process improvement webinars, one of the things that came out is just really ask why. Why do we do this? Why are you doing it that way? And you'll find out that there's a lot of things that may be happening that people don't really know why they're doing it anymore. It just has always been that way. So that's one quick way to start eliminating some redundancy or waste in your processes. The encourage people to do when you're looking at a process is also look upstream and downstream. So that means, why is the process even starting? What for this to happen? And how are we going to use this once we have automated it? Once this portion of this process is completed, what comes next? And see if you can kind of embrace both ends of those and widen your scope, or at least get the scope to where you can really have a well-defined idea of what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, and why it's been triggered. So how this workflow plays in your whole organization, really what I'm talking about here, and what else that you can probably provide to your end users and to the other people that need the information that you're gathering. The next step, of course, is to map out your proposed process. So you go from what we started with, what we think the process is, and then after doing all this research and talking to the people involved and finding out why we're doing these things and what is needed to start this and what is needed at the end of this cycle, map out a new process or even an improved process, then present that back to your users again, and make sure that you get the buy-in from them as well. And then, of course, review and forms. And like I mentioned before, it may not even be that there's a form or a data gathering device in place for this process today. So maybe you have to create the form, or in some cases the form is the user interface into this new application that you're building. So, treat that with some thought as well, because that's going to drive this whole process. So that's preparation for any workflow design. You kind of have to know these things. The purchase requisition is kind of my standard demo that I will do, and it's a pretty slow process. So I'm going to talk through, what it does, and then we'll look at some questions that we want to ask as we're going to do this, and then we're going to go and this out in FastFlow. So you're familiar with this process if you've ever heard this is one of our standard demonstrations of a purchase request made by a FormFast user to a supervisor for their evaluation, and then background, the rules of workflow will try and say, if this request is over $10,000, it needs a higher level of approval, and if it's under that $10,000, it can go direct to purchasing. And output that in various ways. So we'll talk about how we can put this information as well. So questions that we want to ask around the process, so that's how you were doing it maybe in the paper process. The questions you want to ask are, which advisor are we doing this to? How do you know? How can we figure that out? When we go to purchase, what's our process in purchasing? Do we send it to one specific person? Send that to a group of people and just deal with them as they come in? Or are the purchases assigned to departments? There's a lot of variables there that we see from our customers. So, and across the board for all of these steps in this workflow. But when I go in and build this, I'm going to show you how we've dealt with that and other options. So there's a lot of options in how we set this up to deal with those types of questions. And the thing is, looking downstream, what are we going to do with this data when we collect it? We're going to put it into a database for reporting. Maybe we're going to trigger some reporting to people. Maybe we're going to notify some people that this was completed. And are we going to put this into an existing database and map our data to that one, or do we want to create a new database just for this? And we'll show you how that's done in FastFlow as well. That's kind of the preliminary setup, and I'm going to go over to my demonstration system here and start this application. It starts with a form. Form is, sorry about that. And the form is just a simple purchase request. You have fillable fields. So there are, other webinars on designing forms. This one happens to have some calculations built into it. And we have the business rules that were used when this is a paper form. They're response to the document. So we see that right there. So this is a form, and we might want to modify the form in form design and add some drop-down menus to this, make some things that we can make more of a digital interface for our users. But for now, this is what we're going to start with, and we can maybe use it for more demos. This form has some properties. One of these is, of course, how we're going to find this form. So we name it and give it a description and some notes, and those are all searchable. So when your users are in their document repository of FastFlow, they can search and find that. Also, categorizing it, I put it into my purchasing category in my workflow category. Fields is kind of a nice feature, a nice form. Basically sets the subject line when you use this form in a workflow. So what it does mean is all the fields that are available to me on this document, and then pick one of those to make that the subject line of my workflow. So it goes from the reader to the next person in the workflow. It's going to say that this is a purchasing request from, and insert vendor name there. customers that have done, they've taken the form design and they've calculated a field for this specific purpose. So they've concatenated several values into one field name and put it into this list. So that way, have a field value that lists on here vendor name, purchase amount, and department. So that's all in the subject line. So that's a nice little that our users have discovered of how to do that. The thing I want to show you is the signature authority. So on the form itself, this is for signatures, and now we have to say who has authority to sign those fields. Here we've assigned it to a group. So where we want that vice president to sign, I have a group set up within my console that is called the Vice Management Group. So there are presidents would be in that group, and they have signature authority over that field. Group set up called department heads. So all of my department heads are in that group as well. I can assign them the signature authority there. The database is the case. We went ahead and clicked the Create Database button, and what that did is within the FormFast database, created a new table for the specific form, and it took every form field, created a table column for us. So one click button created this entire mapping of data. So now every time this goes through a workflow, it's going to collect this information into that table so that we can do reporting later, even use it as pre-fill for downstream processes related to this. Of pre-fill, we've done the pre-fill mappings. There's the user connection, which gives us things like the timestamp, user's first and last name, user's phone number, email. Initiation stamp is kind of an audit trail right on the form. And department. Looking up from an external database, the vendors. So we're looking at vendor, and I'll show you here what this looks like when I go to map some information to this form. So my form, show me the existing mappings that I have right now. So you get mappings that are already on the form, and these mappings from the base. And I want to go ahead and add the vendor address. So I'm going to look here for vendor address. It shows me a drop down of my database fields that are available. If I wanted to search on address, I could add the search label, and that way it would prompt me when I do my pre-fill for the address. I don't want that in this case. So I'm going to go OK. And now I've got the vendor's address listed along with the rest of the vendor's information. So in this table. So I can go back and I could have how I mapped all of those fields is through that visual interface. It makes it very easy. Is that I'm going to go in and create a new workflow. I'm going to go ahead and click the Add button, and I'm just going to name this one Demonstration. And choose my forms. I know that I categorize that form into workflows, demos. So now workflow demo, it was the purchasing request. So I add the form to my my workflow, and I'll click Next. And the option to either build a new route or select from any existing routes that I have built. This is a feature because if I have something that is somewhat of a standardized process that a lot of documents will go through, I can reuse that route over and over again. Also, if that route changes for all those processes, change it in one place and it updates for all of the forms using that. I'm going to do this is to choose one of these routes as a starting point, copy it, and then modify it. So when I go to modify the route, it would ask me if I want to modify it for all forms or if I want to create this route. So what I'm going to do instead of that is actually build a new route, because that's what this webinar is about. Start the route. There's one route have, and that's the initiator. That's who's starting it. So in our scenario, that could be anybody in our organization. So add a step. The first step that we talked about was that a department head is going to go and approve this. Now, if we have logic on the form that we can use to define who that next department head is or who the department is, we can route based on our hierarchical tree. So a current user and their department head. So here we do that. The other step, and what we do is show you a prompt step, because we have information in the document, which happens quite a bit, and we want to go ahead and prompt the user to go ahead and pick a department head. So I'm going to say choose the description is what's going to show up to the user. So I'm going to say department head as my prompt text, and I'm going to restrict this to a group because I want this to be as easy as possible. So I want to say I'm going to use a user group again, the same user group that I used in the signature setup for department heads. And this is just going to display to my user only the people that are members of that group. Okay, first step in there, we're going to, the initiator is going to fill it up. It's going to prompt them to route to the department head. The next step is, let's decide if this is going to go to the president or not. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just say role. I'm going to select a role of, let's see, there it is, Education Hospital. I'm going to set that to go to Vice President. So in this case, we're saying every one of these purchase requests that is over $10,000 is reviewed by this particular person. But I add that says over $10,000. So I clicked on the link this step to a form field, and then the option to say is a checkbox or a text field, and it's a text field. It will present to me a list of all the text fields on this document. I'm going to look for that total amount. Is greater than 10,000. So this evaluates to true is going to this person. If not, it's going to ignore this step. So it's indicated here as a conditional step. Step was this to our purchasing group. Route this to a group, and it's going to be a user group and a purchasing queue. So the users in the purchasing queue or in the purchasing group, so we have several people that would receive this workflow. Once it's been once it's been approved, it will leave that group for its next step. Okay, so that's much my routing. Let me go to our picture here. So it covers all of the people in this route. And then we go to final disposition, and we're going to go ahead and in this we don't have any attachments, but we can add attachments if we wanted to. We can make attachments required. We can decide which steps in the workflow prior attachments, or we can just let everybody add attachments to the workflow. Signatures. We did have some signatures, right? So we're going to add signatures. So the first one we want to do is at the department head. And the second one was at the vice president. Signatures. We have step actions and final dispositions. They're both basically the same thing. It's what do you want to do once this processed or once this entire workflow has been processed. So I'm going to go to final dispositions, and I'm going to database, and I'm going to say, let's push the database every time this form is processed. We also have the opportunity to modify how the email message to notify users that this is in their inbox, what that's like and what is read there. We can assign the departments, we can give permissions and put this in categories as well. So I'm going to go ahead and done because I've done everything that I need to do on that particular workflow. So now what that looks like, I go to my documents, I'm here, I see I'm in my workflow demo category, I have that purchase request. So prior to my setup, before I created this demonstration workflow, so remember when I named the workflow, what workflow this form is located right here on the document screen, so you can do that. So you can see what you're going to be starting. So with the Start button, we're going to start the demonstration workflow. And tie this to a prefill in the form properties. We said, how are we going to prefill this? So I'm going to put in vendor number, and we'll search those vendors. And that prefill that we talked about. You added that address while we were looking here, but all this other stuff was already done. So we've got the vendor information added to the form. From my personal profile, we're pulling a date stamp, we're pulling my department, my name, phone number, fax, email. So information that I have in my personal profile we can put in here as well. So of course, we can add our descriptions. What I'm going to do is it's going to calculate across and calculate down, and those are properties of the form, the document itself. So through this kind of quickly, I want to show you what I like next. So this is where we added that prompt step. It says choose your department head, just like I said when we were doing that. I showed you where that would be set. And this is everybody I have in that group that I defined. Head Joe Miller, and I'm going to send that over to Mr. Miller. So if I log in as department head, we're going to that. So workflow name here, demonstration. I set field, that value was set to vendor name, so that shows me distributing right there. So I see all the information that was entered in the, and I can sign and send, and then that's going to go over to my queue for purchasing. My purchasing managers will see that, and do the next step. It would write to the database. To then create reports off of that. So we have 5 minutes left for questions. I know this is a half-hour session, so I want to go ahead and stop there. It gets redundant walking through the workflow. I want to open up the line so that we can start taking questions. And we'll be available, an upcoming future webinar to talk about the conditions and how we can handle that data. And how we can message that information out to your other users. So, Philip, I'm going to open it up if you have questions for me.
Well, while we wait for questions, if anybody has a question, just go ahead and write it in the chat or in the Q&A down below. And wait for those questions. I'll take a quick second to talk about upcoming events. So as we just noted, November's user group webinar, which is on Friday, November 2nd, we're going to show you the various ways to output your workflow. So the webinar is just showing you how to build it, and then we're going to show you how to output it next month, and that's on Friday, November 2nd. If you haven't registered for that already, the link will be provided on the next page. And next month, on November 13th, FormFast will feature a special live video broadcast from Nashville, and that's going to discuss the healthcare policy of the newly elected administration and also the effect that it will have on healthcare in the future. And I really want to be a part of this important and panel discussion, so that link will also be provided at the end of this webinar as well. And we did get a question come in. The question, do you have to log in to be able to see the prompts that you have, or are you notified of those that you have a workflow waiting for you?
Yeah. So what happens is, as you're a user receiving a workflow item, the ability to control your settings, and one of those settings is whether or not you want to receive an email message. So realize that you're probably not always going to be sitting around with the FAST workflow inbox open just like you would an Outlook inbox. So what we do when a workflow item lands in your FASTO inbox, we send you an email message to your Outlook or to your mail handler so that you have an alert and a link back into that so you're aware of what's happening.
It looks like that was the only question. If you do have a question after the session, send the question to my email. It's on the next pblanks@formfast.com. Again, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully this information will be useful and also encouragement for you to upgrade to some of the new products that we have available. The recording link of this webinar is going to be sent out to everyone, so you'll all be able to receive this recording. Also, you'll be able to see it on the next page as well once it's uploaded. So thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar, and we'll see you all next month.
Everybody.